Hello everyone. I am Mrs. Nana Aisha Abdurazak and I would be taking you all managerial economics. I'm sure you all have seen your course outline and your study materials. So our first class is going to be on the basics, which is the meaning, features, scope and assumptions of managerial economics. Okay, so what exactly is managerial economics? What do we mean when we say managerial economics? For us to be able to bring out a standard or a good definition of managerial economics, we first need to know what economics is all about. One of the standard definitions for economics is the study of production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. When we say production, distribution, and consumption, we're basically classifying everyone, regardless of if you're producing or you're not producing. Because if you're not producing, you're consuming, right? So you're under the consumption, you're under a consumer. And if you're a producer or a distributor, you're under production and distribution. So it classifies every single one of us. A second definition is the study of choices related to the allocation of scarce resources. People usually say our wants can be unlimited. We can keep saying, I want this, I want that. It's endless, but resources are limited. Resources are scarce. Right. So now the first definition, which is the one that classifies all of us, production, distribution, and consumption, it indicates that economics includes any business, regardless of if you're a profit organization, a non-profit organization, administrative unit. It classifies every single one of us, right? Now, the second definition, which is choices related to allocation of scarce resources, it establishes that economics is at the core of what managers of these organizations do. Now, the manager of every business, regardless of the way it is being run, are you a non-profit, an NGO, a profit-making organization, whatever, the managers of this organization, they must know how to allocate resources properly, efficiently. That is what a manager of any business must know. Now, microeconomics, which is a branch of economics, because economics is divided into two broad branches where we have micro and macroeconomics. Now, when we say micro, we're saying small, right? And when we say macro, we're saying the aggregate, the huge aspect. So, microeconomics, it's related to goods and services, but from the perspective of individuals, from the perspective of firms. So when we're saying microeconomics, we're talking about households, businesses, firms. But when we say macroeconomics, we're talking about the whole aspect. So we're talking of things like growth level of the economy, unemployment, inflation. We're talking about factors that affect the entire economy, the macro aspect. So that's what macroeconomics is all about. Now let's come to the main aspect of our conversation, which is managerial economics. Managerial economics, particularly, can be said to be the study of allocation of resources which are available to a business, firm, or an organization. Now, business or managerial economics is fundamentally concerned with the art of economizing. This means we must make rational choices in order to get the maximum return out of our minimum resources and effort, which means we have to make the best selection among alternative courses of action. This means for an for a managerial economist to be seen as efficient or to be a good managerial economist, you must know how to make rational choices. And when we say making rational choices, it means when you put in a minimum amount of resource or a minimum amount of effort, you should be able to yield maximum return. Are we together? So say for instance, you only have, let's say, 200,000 naira to start a business and you hire a managerial economist. This managerial economist should be able to tell you how to invest or exactly what to invest your 200,000 in that would yield maximum return. And then the managerial economist should also be able to tell you how to make the best selection among a huge, like a wide range of courses of action. Now that's what it means to be a good managerial economics, and that's what managerial economics is about. Now, since the purpose of managerial economics is to apply economics to improve managerial decisions in an organization, most of the subject material in managerial economics are microeconomics focused, because remember we say microeconomics deals with households and firms, right? And a managerial economics is mainly assigned to firms, right, to businesses. So which means managerial economists tend to focus on the microeconomics aspect. However, because this managerial economist must consider the state of their environment before making decisions. Say, for instance, I want to go into importation of rice, and my managerial economist in my organization is saying, yes, importation of rice is going to bring in good returns. Simply because he's only looking at the microeconomic aspect, forgetting that we are having increase in exchange rate, right? So I'm going to spend more because I'm doing importation and not exportation. So he's going to, because he's not looking at the macro aspect, right? The aggregate aspect. He's not looking at, okay, what happens if there's closure of borders? What happens if the exchange rate skyrockets? So a managerial economist must also look at the overall aspect. The managerial economist must also look at the macro aspects and not just the microeconomic focus. So that's what a managerial economist must do as well. Now let's look at some features of managerial economics. One, it involves an application of economic theory, especially microeconomic analysis. Secondly, it is not just a science but also an art which facilitates better managerial discipline. This means that it tends to explore and enhances economic mindfulness and awareness of business problems and managerial decisions. Lastly, it is concerned with firms' behavior in optimal allocation of resources. This is what we just explained now. Then, when we say assumptions of managerial economics, we're saying for a managerial economist to make a decision, right, there are certain things he's going to assume. Are we together? There are certain things he's going to say, okay, I'm assuming all these factors are put in place. I'm assuming everything is standard. I'm assuming all these things are available. So now let's look at some of these assumptions of managerial economics. Number one, we have what we call the ceteris paribus assumption. Now, ceteris paribus is a Latin phrase which means every other thing being equal, every other thing being the same, nothing is changed. That's what it means, every other thing being equal. So let me give an example of okay, let me use the law of demand. Now, the law of demand says everything being equal, when prices go up, demand will go down. This means, say for instance, we're all into buy, let's say we're buying pure water from the school shop for 100 naira for one. And now, say before we used to buy 5 every day, but now the price has gone up from 100 naira to 500 naira. We can no longer buy 5, right? We will now say, okay, let's buy 2 or let's buy just 1. So that's what we're saying. So when prices go up, our demand falls. However, that ceteris paribus assumption there is saying when prices go up, demand will fall only if every other thing is the same. So your allowance or your income is still the same. The weather is the same. Your taste is the same. Everything is the same. Because if anything changes, the law of demand might also change. So say the prices went from 100 naira to 500 naira, but your annual salary went up from, let's say, 200,000 to 500,000 as well. So if your salary goes up to 500,000, it means you can still buy 5 pure water that you used to buy, even though the price has gone up. So now you see that when your income changes, it now affects the law of demand. So this means not everything is equal anymore. Something has changed. It's not only price that has changed, something else has changed. Are we together? Or say for instance, you used to buy coffee. You used to buy coffee because let's say tea is more expensive than coffee, so every day you buy coffee instead of tea. But now you decide, okay, I want to start living a healthier life, or I want to start eating healthier. So even though tea is more expensive, I want to go and start buying tea. Do you see? So even though price has gone up for tea, you are still going to buy more tea, because what has happened? Your taste. You have changed your taste from coffee now to tea. So something else has changed aside price. So that is why when managerial economists are making decision, we say ceteris paribus. Every other thing is the same. Your income is still the same. Your taste is still the same. The weather is still the same. The substitute good complement, every other thing is the same. So if everything is the same, when the price of your commodity goes up, your demand would fall. So that's what ceteris paribus mean. Every other thing being the same. Now, for psychological assumption, this means it is assumed that regardless of whether you are a consumer, a producer, an agent, whatever, it is assumed that we all have rational thoughts. It is assumed we all think rationally. We are all rational thinkers. This means if you have, let's say, 5,000 naira in your hands and you go to a supermarket, it is assumed that you would want to buy you would want to make the most out of that money, right? You are seeking maximization of total satisfaction in your purchases. Whatever you buy, it's it's the maximum satisfaction you can get from that money. So that's what the psychological assumption is basically all about. So for the structural assumption, it usually revolves around nature or topography or climate, biological limitation of human resources. This is usually what it revolves around. Now, say for instance, in studying agricultural economics, we generally tend to assume that not every single type of land can be used to plant every single type of crop for every season, right? So also in industrial activity, we assume that biological biological factors limit the labor supply of an individual. This means that just because I own a firm and I have 5 workers, and I feel like okay, they are making let's say we're into the supply of, let's say, donuts, and I feel like why are we only getting 500 donuts every day? Like why are they only being able to produce 500 donuts every day? I want us to start being able to produce 2,500. So I have 5 workers and I want to get an output of 2,500 donuts. I cannot say just because I want to do that, I'm going to double their working hours. Are we together? Workers would get tired once their normal capacity is exhausted, right? So even if I double their working hours or triple their working hours, they would not be as productive as their normal working hours. That's a fact. And then we also have a biological fact, and this involves psychological factors that once your workers get to a certain limit, say for instance we're working every day 9 to 5, 9 in the morning till 5 p.m., and we start earning, let's say, 300,000 every month, and now you come and meet me who is working 9 to 5 Mondays to Friday, and I'm earning 300,000 every month, and you tell me, okay, I'm going to start to pay you 350,000 if you can work 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. Mondays to Saturdays. I probably would not agree, because at this point I'm beginning to prefer my leisure period, which is my free period. Probably I have other things to do at my free period, so I probably would not agree to the 350,000, and I would most likely prefer my own free hours, which is from that 5 p.m. till maybe midnight, and then Saturdays and Sundays. So that's what the psychological factor is all about. Then, lastly, we have the institutional assumption. Now, for the institutional assumption, it's usually related to the type of economic system and its political setting. So, I'm sure you guys have heard of capitalist economy, social economy, and the mixed economy. So, for instance, if you're having a capitalist economy, when we say an economy is a capitalist economy, this means things like factories, railroads, mines, they can be owned by individuals, they can be privately owned. So, for instance, we have countries like United States, the UK, Canada, Ireland, Switzerland. All those economies can be considered as a capitalist economy, right? So if we're studying the behavior of a capitalist economy, we have to assume that there is very minimum government control, and that market mechanism has a strategic role in arriving at economic decisions, which means their supply and demand would move the economy and bring the economy to an equilibrium. Now, if you're talking of a socialist economy, this kind of economy is like an economy where everything is under the government control, right? So say for instance North Korea, everything is under the government control. So the government have absolutely absolute control over the economy, right? When we talk of a mixed economy, a mixed economy is, let's say Nigeria, for instance. Now, why do we say Nigeria is a mixed economy? Because it includes a variety of private freedom. We have our own private freedom, but then we also have a centralized economic planning, and we also have government regulations. So you can see there is a mix of a capitalist economy and a socialist economy combined to make a mixed economy. So when you're studying the behavior of a mixed economy, we have to assume that the strategic role of the public sector and the relative scope of the private sector, which have to both be clearly defined. So now that's what institutional assumption is all about.